Many of the conversations we have and stories we write at 1819 are about the disappointing things going on in Montgomery. Well, today I'm bringing on someone who's just an overall encouragement. State Rep or Representative Ernie Yarbrough is coming on to share about some incredible legislation that he has. You're also going to hear his story about what has shaped and molded him into someone who is unbelievably passionate about liberty and conservative causes. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. I'm Bryan Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. And there's very few people in the state legislature that are pursuing a free and flourishing Alabama more than my guest today. Probably no one in the state legislature, and there's some good guys doing good things, and I'm bringing them all on to talk to you. But I put this guy at the very top of the list of someone who understands deeply what liberty and freedom means, where it's rooted in the scriptures, all of these things. And that's State Rep or Representative Ernie Yarbrough from Trinity, Alabama. Bringing him on today to talk about some bills that he has. He has the Lake and Riley Act, which is a state immigration bill which partners with U.S. Senator Katie Britt's very fine legislation at the federal level. Parental Equal Protection Act, which is personhood bill that grants children in the womb the same protections that children outside the womb are afforded. The Adeline Deal Act, which is vaccine status shouldn't matter when it comes to whether you can get organ donations and these type of things. And then the Alabama Conscientious Right to Refuse Act, which protects individuals and businesses against vaccine mandates. So as you can hear from these bills, this is a very conservative guy pushing things that actually reflect what he ran on, which is not what you usually see in Montgomery. So very excited about this. And some of these bills are actually getting looked at and moved through the State House. And so I think that's very good. Before I bring Ernie on, though, I want to tell you guys to please, if you're enjoying 1819 News, and I know that you are, that's why you watch my podcast, we need your help. We need your support. You can join this fight with us. You can be a part of the pursuit of truth and justice that we have in our state as we go and shine a light on corruption in the halls of power here at 1819 News. You can go to the website and become a member. At the top of the screen, it says become a member at our website, 1819news.com. Click that button, and membership start as little as $5 a month. With that, you will get access to special behind-the-scenes content. Like I'm going to be recording with Ernie today, we're going to talk about tariffs, globalism, and free trade. And I bet we're going to say some things that you've never heard from a politician or really anyone on this very hot topic right now, with all the tariffs and everything else. But you also get merch. We have cool hats, maybe not as cool as the hat that Ernie's wearing right now, but we have cool hats, all kinds of different cool merch. But more than merch, more than access to behind the scenes content, you get to be part of the mission. You get to be the citizen in citizen supported journalism. And so please go sign up and become a member today if you have not done that. But now, the moment you've all been waiting for the last 2 minutes and 53 seconds. Bringing on Ernie Yarbrough, Representative, the Honorable Ernie Yarbrough. Ernie, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, brother.
Thank you so much. I don't know that I've heard that many good adjectives put by my name since I've gotten in office, but I'll take them.
That's right.
No, but thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. No, I think that, some of the opening comments you were making about, some of the bills that I filed, obviously my hat, like Imago Dei, image of God. And, for me, I think it's really important as a legislator that, we think about our state party platform and our beliefs made in the image of God, what we ran on. And I feel like that, what we do should reflect that. I think that it should be a very plain blueprint. I believe this House matches the blueprint, and that's how we should operate in our lives. And so, it's really important to me that my political efforts, for as long as God has me in this position, reflect the clear blueprint I believe that we are as citizens and patriots and Christians called to enact.
Yep. Well, you've been on my podcast before, but it's been a minute, okay? And I mean, my podcast instant has exploded with millions more people watching than, okay, maybe not millions.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know what the number is, but there's definitely people watching today. that did not watch the first time you came on a couple years ago. And so if you could just kind of real quick bullet point, who is Ernie Yarbrough? Where were you born? Tell us about growing up. Tell us about, the fights that your father was in, the story, the plug yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself before
Sure.
we dive into this legislation.
Sure, no, I'll be honored to. So my name is Ernie Yarbrough. I'm State House Representative District 7. District 7 is like north central to northwest Alabama, moving kind of more so northwest. And so you've got a little piece of Morgan County, you got all of Lawrence County, and a bigger piece of Colbert County there. I grew up in a family. My parents ended up deciding to homeschool 3 kids. There was a season in my life, I kind of feel like my wife and I kind of laughed, but I feel like COVID kind of got everybody else up to a healthy level of skepticism about their government, as I did growing up, because my dad and our friends suffered and were taken away for a season from us for what they believed in. My dad suffered for a season because he was imprisoned because he didn't want babies murdered. He didn't feel like it was right for our taxpayer dollars. Kudos to Coach Tuberville. I didn't feel like our tax dollars should be used to pay for the murder of children in the womb. We had friends who were thrown in jail as homeschoolers in the Decatur back in the 80s when I was a kid. So we did like prayer vigils on the steps of the courthouse, all this kind of stuff that, as a kid, when you see your loved ones and friends suffer for like what you think is just normal Republican Party platform stuff, freedom of education, protecting the unborn. It really, as a child, it really deeply affected me. And it caused me to realize that our government is only as good as the people who are sitting in those seats and the beliefs that they have. As Richard Weaver wrote in his book, ideas have consequences. So growing up, that marked me very much. My dad obviously got out of prison in the 80s. He was a serial entrepreneur. So I grew up learning to work back when electronic ballast came in, those 2x4 fluorescent lights in hospitals, office buildings, nursing homes. I grew up, learning to work night shift or whatever, make good money. My dad always kind of put me and my brother in a place where, it was normal that he expected us to act like grown men and to love it. And so we fell in love with, I guess we love sports and basketball and all those things too, and had a great childhood, but we learned to love to work and get after it. And, at the same time, being raised in a homeschool family, you're exposed to, my dad was a reader. He was a paralegal. So we read, Constitution, Blackstone's commentaries on the law, memorized Patrick Henry speeches, founding fathers, Federalist, anti-Federalist papers, and as well as Louis L'Amour Western novels and different things. And so we were very much a voraciously reading family. Daddy would take us in family devotions. We read the book of Proverbs, like Proverbs 1 for day 1 of the month and so on. And then sometimes like he'd get out the editorial of the newspaper, or we would go to the mall and we would analyze people or stories in the paper based on what we read in Proverbs. And he would ask questions. Well, how does this verse apply to this? And just so training us in a Christian worldview, how we view the world. It reminds me, actually, I saw, it was a quote here. It was so good. I saved on my phone, I believe, by George Washington. And he said, you do well to wish to learn our arts and ways of life, and above all, the religion of Jesus Christ. While we are zealously performing the duties of good citizens and soldiers, we certainly ought not to be inattentive to the higher duties of religion, to the distinguished character of patriot. It should be our highest glory to add the more distinguished character of Christian. And so, that was kind of how my dad raised me and my brother and sister. That patriot and Christian went together in how you view the world. So kind of, I met my childhood sweetheart when I was 10 and she was 9. And her dad is now my pastor of 30 plus years. And so in that venue, also Dr. George Grant, many of your listeners probably know him. He's a dear friend of mine and mentor. I met in high school. And so he ended up taking me to Scotland, and now we do history tours of Scotland and things together, of church history and political history and Southern history. But in that context, to getting married and now got 4 kids, really COVID was kind of what launched me into politics, because we had a state representative who, he ran on an anti-tax, anti-government overreach platform. And it was very quickly into office that, only did he vote for tax hikes that over 90% of our district did not want. But he twice brought legislation that would have put every gun owner in the state in a database, not because they had committed a crime, but simply had a gun permit. And so, those things like get the jab or lose your job, So that's kind of what stirred us into praying about, should we run and get into politics? And so that's what really led us to eventually praying and jumping in. Campaign slogan is "Make Alabama Local Again." Believe localism, local grassroots, the people ought to be the tip of the spear for how we address our problems and restore our liberties and our faith and our freedoms. And so we ended up knocking 6,000 doors. And that, we could do a whole podcast on that, running from wild dogs and stuff, funny stuff, but also moving stuff, because people who just came out of COVID, there were doors that you would knock and people would cry and you'd pray with them. And you'd almost forget to even give them a palm card, because people coming out of COVID were hurting. And so the idea that, once again, this redneck shows up at their door and just wants to talk, like old Southern culture, let's just sit on the rocking chair and talk. People love that. It was a life-changing experience for me. So through all that knocking, we beat an incumbent by double digits, and here we are today.
Wow. That's incredible, Ernie. You and I talk all the time. You're someone I consider a dear friend. Your father sends me text messages that are extremely encouraging with all the stuff he taught you as a kid. He sends me that stuff either in emails or text messages just about every day. And it's good stuff, man. And, I've heard your story just like you've heard my story probably 1,000 times. I've heard your story 1,000 times, and I'm just moved by it every time I hear it. So thank you for sharing that. And, it's not an easy thing to be in a state house, a House of Representatives, that for a very long time, like, this isn't new. Some people would say I pick on Nathaniel Ledbetter, and it's not him. I actually genuinely like Nathaniel Ledbetter, the Speaker of the House, Mr. Speaker. I think he's a good person. I would say he and I don't see exactly eye to eye on politics or whatever, but he inherited a house that has been going the way that it's been going for a long time, and how business as usual politics. But the problem is that the business as usual is not what the people of the state want. And there has to be a change, and you would be what is considered a disruptor. And there's been disruptor predecessors of yours. Andrew Sorrell was a disruptor. And I think Andrew Sorrell would say this, is that you've actually been more effective as a disruptor because of your communication abilities, the fact that you're very kind, and you sit and you want to create relationships with people and get them to see things how you see and the way that the word actually says. And you've had probably a much more positive impact as a disruptor. And again, Andrew's amazing, and now he's the state auditor and going to be running to be the Secretary of State. Has done phenomenal things, and he was told that by being a disruptor, he would never make it anywhere in politics, and he wouldn't even get reelected. Well, now he's looking at potentially being our next Secretary of State. So there's value in being a disruptor in a system that needs to be disrupted, and there's a value in going about it in a way that you don't actually, doesn't need to be ugly. It doesn't have to be that way, and I think you do a really good job of just bringing the word of God to bear on what's going on, and being very commonsensical in your approach to things. And so I really appreciate that about you.
Well, thank you. I think it's important that, on the one hand, if we don't stand for, like, our whole history as Americans, I mean, this ring, right? The 1776 ring. I mean, we have a heritage as Americans where literally we took on the superpower of the world because we thought we were getting taxed a little too much, and we didn't have a voice. And there were other reasons too. Obviously, you read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. There's an enumeration, a listing out of the issues, right, and quartering on homes and other things as well. But there's no escaping the fact that every 4th of July we celebrate the fact that we had armed resistance to tyranny. Like, that's our heritage as Americans, without which we don't have a country. So there has to be this infusion of a rediscovery of bold, manly courage, like moral courage, principled courage. That is our story. That is our, as it were, our blast of the trumpet to the world, that America is a place of moral courage, political courage, cultural and religious courage. So at the same time, to your point, while we have to go in and do things that, like, this is right and good and true, and we know that we've had some bills come through where, men in dresses and women trying to grow beards show up, and they're like, all the zombie skeleton talons, whatever, come out, And so, but you have to just know who you are in the Lord Jesus and stand firm and say, I mean, really, the Bible, the verse that says those that oppose, pulling from the fire, those that oppose themselves. Right. And so those kind of people you see as people who oppose themselves, they don't even know that they oppose their own happiness. And so you have to be gracious and yet firm and hold the line in those situations. And then with my colleagues, obviously I'm not the end all be all. I have much I can learn. But at the same time, I think I have a pretty good grasp on what the people of Alabama want, because I'm a son of Alabama. I was raised in this state, and I love Alabama, and I know what our state party platform is. I know what the issues are and how they poll, right? And I was raised to believe and love those things because this is my home state, right? In my home country. So I think it's important that on the one hand, I tell my wife all the time, I think I could say it best this way. I said, I pray all the time that, Lord, if I have to be offensive, let it be my principles and not my person.
Mm.
Right. And so that's my goal, is that if there has to be iron sharpening iron and sparks and heat and debate and, tension, let it be clear that this is not an issue of me just being rude to you or deceitful to you or ugly to you. That should have no place in the conduct of a Christian man. But what this is a strong and heated debate over the principles and policies and values that are going to guide and shape our nation and set the tomorrow of Alabama that our kids are going to inherit.
Man, one day you and I just need to do like a 3-hour Joe Rogan in person where we just start shooting off the cuff, because I've got all this stuff I want to now talk to you about based off everything you just said. And it's like, well, we have this other stuff I want to get to because it's the end of the legislative session and these bills are important and so on and so forth. So,
sure.
I will say we're going to have a fun conversation in the overtime segment. If you're not a member, go there and sign up to get in on this conversation that we're about to have regarding tariffs, globalism, free trade, and what the effects of shipping jobs overseas and importing overseas workers into our cities and towns, and the fact that our nation doesn't actually produce that much anymore, and da-da-da-da-da. That's going to be a really good conversation that Ernie and I jump into. But now I want to give you the opportunity to talk about some of these bills. They're all, again, they're just so principled and rooted and well done, and even the names of them and everything is so well thought out. And I just really appreciate the work you do, making sure these bills are what they're supposed to be. And the one that has the most legs right now is the Lake and Riley Act. And so that is a state immigration bill which partners with U.S. Senator Katie Britt's piece of legislation at the federal level to work here in the state. Talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, this bill actually predates Senator Katie Britt's bill. This bill came to my attention last session before Senator Britt had hers. It came to my attention because I saw that this was a bill by this name in Georgia, which makes sense, right? That's where Lake and Riley lost her life. And I thought, hey, this is a great bill, right? And so I actually had it drafted last session, and then had it actually made it through committee last session, but we ran out of time because I didn't see it till later in the session. Then, last session gambling was the thing, and so gambling kind of took over the whole conversation space in the legislature. So, but what the Lake and Riley Act does, so I pre-filed it for this year, and we've moved it through 2 committees this year, public safety and then also judicial. And so it is primed, God willing. I expect it to be on the floor this Thursday, picked, God willing, tomorrow, Tuesday, April the 15th. So what the Lake and Riley Act does is it allows state and local law enforcement to enter into an MOU with the federal government to enforce existing immigration laws.
What is an MOU?
Right? So an MOU is a memorandum of understanding. Okay. So basically what it does is it gives a structured contractual path for state and local law enforcement to enter into a well-defined agreement with the federal government to enforce existing immigration laws. And the benefit of that is what it does. Like, who knows better where the crime or the issues are in our local towns and cities and communities than local law enforcement, right? So what it does is, instead of just saying, hey, ICE, go all over the nation and just kind of wing it and do your best, why not partner with local law enforcement and state law enforcement who know and understand their communities and their grassroots areas, and let them work with you to enforce the immigration laws via the MOU, via your direction, based on whatever laws are on the books and what the focus of the federal government, what they want it to be for enforcing our immigration laws. So the benefit of that is that now it brings the grassroots law enforcement into and co-ops them into that effort, and almost overnight creates a well-trained, knowledgeable armed force, right, to walk out the enforcement of our laws in a legal, sensible, rational, and moral way to quickly address the problem of immigration that has been flooded into our country.
That's good. That's good. And again, that one appears to have the most legs. And I want to give Speaker Ledbetter credit on that. He came to you and said, "Hey, what's that Lake and Riley Act? Let's get that going." And so,
kudos to you guys for helping get the word out. As you guys watch all the bills get filed and you pick different bills. Hey, this looks good. This looks good. This is important. This is, obviously having citizen sponsored journalism is help.
Amen. If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons, it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be Bryan, Bryan.Dawson, Dawson, at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. Not parental, prenatal and parental have the same letters in it. I don't know if you knew that. And when you look at it really quickly, it says parental, but it's prenatal. Prenatal Equal Protection Act, a personhood bill that grants children in the womb the same protections that children outside of the womb are afforded. This one is very, 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 very important. You've done personhood legislation before. You've dropped equal protection legislation. But I want to spend some time talking about the theory and philosophy and theology and worldview behind this legislation. But hit us with what the bill does, and then I want to get into the actual conversation about personhood.
Sure. Yep. So when Roe v. Wade was overturned, the natural and right reaction among the conservative and faith-based community is praise God, thank God, and so never thought that would happen. And so, but then what we begin to discover is that I've read some reports where there are now, they estimate more abortions than before when Roe was when Roe was not overturned because of chemical abortifacients. Right, chemical abortion pills, or as some people call them, murder pills. And so that, of course, as someone who is a pro-life advocate who believes that life begins at conception, that all life is made in the image of God, and even as Dr. Seuss said, a person is a person no matter how small. That was incredibly troubling to me, because one of the tenets of the pro-life movement is that we have a moral obligation to speak on behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves, and to defend life at every stage, because all life is precious and made in the image of God. And so as I looked into it, I was like, how can this be? What I discovered was that our homicide laws in Alabama afford no protections to the baby in the womb if the person taking the life of the baby is the mother. At the same time, that also doesn't afford protections to women who would like to tell that boyfriend or husband or parent or whoever is pressuring them to do this thing, because the baby was not protected, and so therefore the woman also is not protected from being bullied into something that she probably doesn't want to do. And so I felt like we have a moral obligation on the one hand to protect the baby, because we ask ourselves, what does all life deserve? We have that obligation as lawmakers and as citizens, but also to protect the women so that they're not in a situation where they're getting bullied and pressured to do things. And also, honestly, it would, I think, decrease rape and incest, because if those people know that the removal of the evidence of their crime is itself a crime, then it will have a healthy effect along the entire value chain of that conversation.
Yep. I think there's a thing that we say when we have the conversation about personhood, equal protection, or, any of these, ways of having the conversation, is that the law has a pedagogical purpose and effect. And what that means is that laws tell the people of a nation, of a state, of a city, of a county, it tells them what is okay and what is not okay. It literally teaches them what is right and wrong. It has a pedagogical effect. The law in the Bible that was given was meant to teach Israel what's good and what's bad, what God likes and what God dislikes, right? And so when you create a law, you're essentially telling your people what is okay and what is not okay. And the way that our laws have been set up for a really long time is that it's actually okay to kill your child, Now the law in the state says that, essentially it's okay to take a pill to kill your child in a way. And maybe not that's how it breaks down, but where we're lacking on the teaching of the wrongness of abortion is that we're telling women that if you kill your child, you're actually not responsible for that act, that you're a second victim.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And so even as I was sharing this with legislators the first time that I filed equal protection, like to a person, to a man, they were shocked to find out that this was the condition of Alabama law, that actually the baby in the womb is completely unprotected if the mother is the one taking the life of the baby. Right. And so to your point, the question becomes one of, well, if the baby was born one day outside the womb and the mother took the life of the child, that child's life would be protected and defended, and she would face consequences. So to tell a woman that she's not responsible for doing, within reason, her good faith effort to protect the child inside of her, and as if somehow this child is somehow fundamentally different from the child outside the womb. But of course, if she was hit by a drunk driver and lost her life, if she was pregnant, they would charge him with double homicide. And so the thing that we have to ask, I think, is equal protection, 14th Amendment, and the fact that we have a history in America where we say, you know what, we're no longer doing this 3/5 clause thing, right? We're not going to draw a circle around a smaller group of people and say, you know what, you're not really going to get the rights of personhood in our legal status. And that's what this bill is addressing, is that right now we have this gaping issue in our law that says children in the womb are not persons. They don't have personhood. They're not due, as the Constitution says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Or as Article 1, Section 35 of the Alabama State Constitution says, the sole object and the only legitimate end of government is to protect the citizen in the enjoyment of life, liberty, and property. And when government becomes abusive of these things, it is usurpation and oppression. Right? They're usurping, they're taking what doesn't belong to them, and they are oppressing and hurting the people. And I make the contention and argument that the child in the womb in Alabama is a citizen of our state and deserves protection because that child is a person made in the image of God.
That's good. Obviously the question, the first thing that's going to be thrown up or at this is, what, does that mean a woman could be held accountable for having an abortion? Obviously, mens rea is a legal concept that people need to be familiar with when having these conversations. What was the intent? Can you prove criminal intent? Was it her intent to murder the child inside of her? Was she under duress? I mean, there's a lot of questions that come up on this. But one of the things I've seen is a lack of experience or seeing whatever media people watch or podcasts they listen to or whatever. They're not seeing everything. There are literally women who shout their abortion. You can do a hashtag search on Twitter or X on shout your abortion. And it's all these women who are celebrating the fact they just killed their kid. Okay. Killed the child inside of them. They're celebrating. There's women who actually enjoy this, and people or for whatever reason, are blinded to that. And they think that every woman who has an abortion is some 14-year-old girl who had a gun put to her head to say, go kill your baby.
Right.
There's a wide range of people who go and participate in abortion, whether it's in a kill mill or an abortion mill, or if it's with a pill, whatever. So talk about that responsibility, of the
Sure.
woman.
Yeah, and I think I'll add in there's some common sense protections in the bill as well, which I'll cover those as well. But to your point, people being blind to the overwhelming pursuit of abortion is just evil. Like, most people have never done abortion sidewalk ministry, right? And to see a woman walk up with a cookie of a picture of a baby on it and eat it in front of your face while dropping all kinds of profanity. Like, in these, almost 100% of abortions are repeat customers, right? I mean, it's not 100%, but it's like high 90s, right? It's a cycle of brokenness and death. And so the idea that a woman does not have a responsibility within within common sense boundaries, a woman doesn't have a responsibility to protect the life of the child inside of her. The idea that life depends on geographical location, and that the duty that we owe to someone depends on the geography of whether they're in the womb or outside the womb is obviously a violation of the equal protection and the 14th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, right? The protection of life has nothing to do with your geographical location.
Yeah.
But the common sense protections in the bill. So, for example, right now in Alabama, like in the bill, a woman is protected from this legal ramifications. If, for example, right now, if I put a gun to your wife's head and said, Bryan, go rob, First Bank downtown, right? Or I'm going to shoot your wife, and you go do that. You're not held responsible for the crime. It's a crime of duress, right? The guy with the gun is, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I said, hey, go kill somebody, they would say, hold on, now you can't, you got to get the police involved, right?
Yeah.
Well, what this bill says is if a woman seeks out an abortion because she's under threat or duress, then she's protected. Now, by logical implication, right, you would expose the people who pressured her to do it to the swift and long arm of the law, right?
Yeah.
But she's protected if she's under threat or duress of violence or scared for her life, right? That's number one. Number two, the bill talks about the fact that if, let's say, a woman who's pregnant and she goes in for a medical procedure, medical checkup, her life's in danger, right? Like an ectopic pregnancy, right? Well, if you do nothing, both the mom and the baby are going to die. So what the bill says is, hey, if in the process of medical procedures, like if they have to go in and remove the embryo, right, in the fallopian tubes, if in the process of there's a reasonable effort, good faith effort made to save both the life of the mother and the baby and the life of the baby's harmed, right, then nothing wrong has been done, right? It's akin to if you have two people hanging off of a cliff and you go to save one and the other person falls, you didn't murder that person, right? You were trying to save them. And so intent matters. And so to your point about having to prove that the woman willfully and intentionally sought the death of her child, but intent matters in any case of the law where you're talking about the loss of life of individuals. So obviously miscarriages don't apply. That's one thing that Ernie wants to put people in jail for miscarriages. But obviously that's stupid and idiotic, and you didn't read the bill. So I can't. Ignorance can be cured, but stupidity is hard to cure. So, whatever. You got to read the bill, but there's common sense protections in there for the life of the mother in the context of acts of God that we can't control, and you're trying to get to save both, but if it's not possible, then you're trying to save life, and then obviously miscarriage, obviously, and then she's protected under threat or duress, and that's important because right now a woman is left exposed. Because right now, if a husband or a boyfriend or a parent or whoever pressures her to take that pill and kill that baby, she has no protections. This bill would afford the woman the protection to say, you better stop talking to me because you're pressuring me to committing a crime, and I'm not going to do it. So, while the argument comes up then, well, what about incest and what about rape? And this is just letting the boys get off scot-free. No. Because now if I make the argument that if the rape and incest person, and hey, if we want to up the crimes on those, let's up the crimes on rape and incest. I'm all for that, right? Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 11 says, because sentence is not executed against an evil work swiftly, the hearts of the sons of men are set to do evil. So I'm all about the swift and long arm of the law. Let's increase those penalties. I'm down with that 100%. But what it does is now she can say, don't pressure me. And now the person or the persons committing the crimes are going to think twice, because now they've got multiple crimes they're going to have to try to cover up for: the rape or the incest and pressuring the woman to kill the life of the child.
Yep.
Right. And so what it does by valuing life and righteousness and order and morality at every point in the value chain, it makes it a hostile environment for criminals and perverts. And that's the goal.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I think the other big words have been hard for me today, Ernie. I don't know what's going on. I was talking to my producer before we started recording, and there's like 5 things I wanted to tell him, and I'm like, I don't know what the word is. I see the word. I just can't get it to my brain, to my mouth to come out. But it's like the frequently asked questions rebuttal. That's the word I'm looking for. One of the common rebuttals to this bill, or bills like this that are being, popping up all over the country now, is there a retroactive protection? And so, if they pass this today, does that mean that a woman who had an abortion yesterday or a year ago or 10 years ago, is she going to get locked up and thrown in prison?
100% no. By nature, it's understood, it's written down, it's known. Laws cannot be retroactive, right? It would be immoral and wicked and wrong, honestly, for us to pass it. Now, it may be that something needs to be outlawed, something needs to be dealt with, but it would be unfair and unjust for a law to get passed that now that's to say that thing that we said was okay back then, now it's a crime.
Yeah.
So 1,000% no. Whenever the effective date of this bill is, as you know, at the end of the bill, it'll say this bill is effective on this date or the signing of the governor or whatever. No, it's from that point when that bill becomes law moving forward.
Yeah.
So it's not retroactive at all, and we can't do that. But we add more stuff into the introduction of the bill and explanations and what we're trying to do and what we're not trying to do. And that actually, we've added some of those things in there as well, because that actually helps, when a case comes before a judge. I took counsel on this with the Alabama Supreme Court. And when we have more information in the introduction of the bill, helps them understand the intent. So we put that stuff in there too. So you'll see crazy things like, Ernie wants to throw a woman in jail from 5 years ago, or they want to throw a woman in jail for miscarriage. The bill deals with all of that. It's simply not true. They've not read it, or they're just intentionally lying, or they're arguing from emotions and not logic or principle. Because at the end of the day, let's just face it, the issue of life and abortion is an intensely spiritual issue.
Yeah. Don't you think it's the most bizarre thing that it almost seems like the Democrat Party's entire platform boils down to like the one thing that they have that keeps people coming back, like their biggest voter block? In somewhere like Alabama, they do have a huge swath of black voters, but over the entire country, if you look at the majority of people who vote for Joe Biden, who vote for Kamala Harris in a presidential election, it's women who want to protect their right to murder their child.
Yeah, I mean, it's really insane to me. And I think it just shows, you look at the cultural movement, like my dad's generation, it was normal for a family to have 5, 6, 7 kids, right? I've got 4, brother-in-law has 8, you've got 1 or 2, 7. And so, the idea that like God says in his word, right, that children are a blessing. Okay, look, I know we lost our first baby. I know miscarriages happen. I've got friends, there's always exceptions, right, or things that happen, hard providences, difficult things, because we live in a fallen world. But we don't get to a national average of 1.6 kids per home because we have decided to agree with God that the fruit of the womb is his reward, right? Yeah. What's happened is we have systematically, there's a great book I've been sharing with people called The Messianic Character of American Education by R.J. Rushdoony. I did my high school senior term paper on that book. How did we get here? Well, early 20th century was the rise of dispensational escapism and rapture. We're getting out of here, coupled with John Dewey and Horace Mann, who said, hey, we're going to shift the educational foundation of America from Christianity to atheism and humanism. And so while the Christians were evacuating places of public service because we're getting out of here, the unbelieving humanist atheists systematically took over those institutions. And it took a century, but it's been effective. And now we're having to undo that and think deeper, because we realize that there may be something deeper to Christian theology than Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins, right? And so we got to rethink the Christian worldview. Like Francis Schaeffer said, I don't want to be so heavenly minded that I'm no earthly good, or so earthly minded that I'm no heavenly good, but I want to be so heavenly minded that I'm much earthly good. Yeah. And so, that's what's happened. And so we're having to, it's a very interesting thing going on to right now, because the data demonstrably shows that young men in this country are shifting hard to the right.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing
right?
to see.
God, it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful, and yet some of the women are left, or some of them maybe shift left, some of the younger women, because we're promoting these cultural lies to women that we get to 1.6 because some of our young women are being taught that children are actually antithetical to their success, right? Children are actually an impediment to what we say is the pinnacle of female success, which is a career or a job or a whatever. Look, my wife is self-employed, okay? And so Proverbs 31 woman, she's making some money. She's doing amazing things. But in the context of a prioritization of that children, the fruit of the womb is heaven's reward. and children are a blessing. And is it any wonder that we see this lack of ability to have relationships, like in the workplace, divorce rate, blah, 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 bad things, relationships, and people not talking, communicating, loving each other, being human? Because if you deprioritize children, and children become a roadblock and a hindrance to your success, you don't raise children, you don't know how to engage with full-grown adults.
Yep.
And so the reality is that when we prioritize and we say, the last 60, 70 years, this worldview we've been taught and sold is a veil of lies. We need to unlearn what we have learned and relearn things that are so old, they seem really new.
Yeah.
Right. And
That's
so
good.
the eternal truths of God's word, and that's what you can build a society and a foundation on. And so as these young men shift to the right, I'm a firm believer that God calls men to be leaders of society, of themselves, of homes, of communities. And as the men go, so go the nation. And that's why I'm excited about the young men shifting to the right. And now numbers showing that there are more young men going to church than young women, which is the first time since the 70s. And as the young men go, so goes the nation. And I believe that they will become men who protect and provide, and will become loving husbands and families where children are once again really seen as heaven's blessing and worth having and sacrificing for. And when that culture of life and family and community is revived, it'll change the course of history.
About to pass the offering plate, Pastor.
Well, I tell you, the more that I'm involved in this state legislative stuff, you see, okay, Susan DeVos had a great bill, and it gets voted down in committee about religious instruction in the schools. And behind that lie, behind that voting down, is this belief that's a lie that somehow our current educational system's not religious.
Yeah.
What educational system doesn't teach kids where they come from, who they are, and where they're going?
And what's right and
They
wrong.
all do. Yeah. Big Bang, right? We come from apes and monkeys and whatever. Who we are, well, just be you, dude. Follow your heart. Whatever truth is your truth. Doesn't matter if you want to be a tranny or use a litter box or whatever. It just utter lies and a divorcing from reality, perversion and wickedness and brokenness. Right. And then where are we going? Well, maybe one day we'll get a utopia through effort and through human labor and through our systematized perfection of data on a phone and a computer, or we'll just go to Mars. So they teach all these things, where you came from, who you are, and where you're going. Religion instruction in schools is inherently religious. What we have to recognize as legislators is it's not a question of a religious or religious. It's a question of who are we going to serve, and what are we going to believe, and how are we going to live?
Yeah. It's not whether our government and our public institutions will have a God, it's which God, right? It's not whether,
That's
but
right.
which. It's not whether our nation will promote morals, it's which morals will they promote, right? And so
100%.
And that's what we've been dealing with. We are a Western European Christian nation. It was founded and rooted in English common law and Israel civil code. We are a Christian nation to our core, and we've abandoned that, and we're suffering the consequences. Jumping down to these next two pieces of legislation, Ernie, there's a V word that if you say on the podcast, YouTube will cancel it. And you have two pieces of legislation that have the V word in it. And I don't want just thinking like any like sixth grade kids that are in biology and they're like, the V word. No, not that V word. It's a different V word that I can't say on my podcast. Maybe we'll call it a jab. I don't know. We'll see. We'll just roll the dice. But I'm just now building my YouTube podcast reach back up.
Internal medicine.
There's only one word that you can't say anymore that YouTube will kick you off for, and that's the V word. Internal medicine. Yes.
Internal medicine delivered by a needle.
Yes, there you go. So talk about your Adeline Deal Act. Where did that name come from? And
Yeah, sure. So I found out that through research, news articles, because we're always living in that world, politics and journalism and all that stuff, that as a sweet young lady, 12 years old, she was from China, adopted, and the bill is her namesake. She was adopted into the extended family of Vice President Vance. And so we had friends in our hometown adopt from China a young lady, and it seems like it's a pattern where China will ship out these children who have severe physical needs because they don't want to deal with them. because China's not really, some of the Chinese communist government probably isn't really known for being compassionate and having a heart. And so they just want to dump these issues, which obviously American Christians, praise God, and their compassion and love are willing to take. And so this young girl we helped get adopted from China had the same thing, a heart issue, right? And so this sweet young lady in Ohio, which is where, of course, VP Vance is from, this family who's related to Vice President Vance, they adopt her. She's got to have a heart transplant. Okay. Well, we have a liberal hospital in Alabama, the U of the A of the B, and it appears Cleveland Clinic in Ohio is similar, right? They would probably also take grants to study the vaginal health of transgender men, if I had to guess. They decided that
you got that V word in.
I did. So they decided that this young lady, along with some military veterans, could not even be put on a list to even potentially receive a heart transplant because they didn't have the COVID jab.
There you
okay.
Go.
So that's, to me, that's wicked, abhorrent, evil, and wrong. And so what this bill does, there's actually a piece of legislation moving through Ohio right now. It says we're not going to use your jab status, right, whether you've had them or not, as criteria to put you on a list to be a recipient or a donor of what the bill calls an anatomical gift or an organ. Wow. Very simple, but I mean, how dare these hospitals do this? It's just, I mean, it's beyond evil.
Yeah. Golly, there's so much I want to say, but I also want to keep my podcast. And the reason we're rebuilding is because last time, when it really was like the heat was on and you weren't supposed to talk about it, and there was a laundry list, we talked about all of it and got kicked off of YouTube, and then ended up building up our Rumble reach and our, Apple Podcast and Spotify and everything. And a lot of people started getting there where you can get the video or audio on a lot of those other platforms as well. But it just, in the grand scheme of things, to reach as many people as possible, you got to be on YouTube. So we'll see. I hate even feeling like I'm dancing around their dictates. It drives me angry. Drives me to the point of being angry, drives me nuts. Anyway. So here's another one, with
on the same
V
topic.
Word. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, think about the fact that we have a university that took $158,000 to study the vaginal health of transgender men. You brought that up, and it's like, this is the supposed university that's like the greatest icon of modern health in the universe is right here in Alabama, and they're the most forward thinking and amazing and all this money. And it's like, dude, we're showing the grants that like Elon Musk is canceling right now, that we're going to UAB and some other universities in the state. Like, they're going to study eating disorders in gays and lesbians and non-heterosexual people. $1.5 million grant, by the way. That one was to Auburn University. But like, it's just insane. But going back to UAB, that this is like the health leader, the world class, the epitome of all things. And they literally had banners up, and now we took pictures and we continued to put that banner up in all the UAB pictures. And the banner was like LGBTQ plus leader, and they advertise, we don't use merit to hire doctors, we use intersectionality. And it's like, well, remind me to not go there for my heart surgery. Yeah. Anyway, I just took the opportunity to vent there, Big Ern.
That reminds me of Cat Williams, the comedian. He said, because Cat Williams is a black guy, he's hilarious. He's a funny comedian. I mean, I listen to just a little bit of him because my Facebook gives me clips, and he apparently is a fan of Trump's.
Yeah.
But he was like, the last time I landed on a flight, he said, I didn't get up there and look in the cockpit and say, "Dadgummit, another flight safely landed by a white guy."
Yeah.
He's like, man, I'm glad to be on the ground. Let's go. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what DEI does. It creates when you inject DEI into stuff that actually matters, people die because of it.
Yeah. It's crazy.
But yeah, so this other, I mean, it is to think about that. Like, there's these grants, like and the only way you get to where you even take that stuff seriously is because there's moral and spiritual perversion, and there's no other, just call it what it is. It's darkness and evil that only must be addressed with the plain shining forth of the light of the truth, unabashedly, unashamedly, and unapologetically.
Yeah.
So, but to your point, the other bill says, hey, we're not gonna allow individuals or businesses to be persecuted because of their medical choices that, in regards to that internal medicine delivered by point of a needle. we're going to let that decision be between them and their doctors, right? And we're not going to allow people's financial and vocational livelihoods to be destroyed, their participation in public society, and we're going to protect businesses in the event that the feds come after them trying to force mandates. It's important, too, because there's no law on the books for this. So the feds or state, whichever one gets the law on the books first, it has precedence in court. And so it's a very simple, straightforward bill. But as usual, when you have those who profit by the maintaining of that system come out against it.
Yeah. I want to sit down one day with me, you, and like Andrew Sorrell, and I don't know, we'll see who we can get on and debate this stuff out. Remember we were having the conversation, and it's like, you can find guys that are like super liberty minded, conservative guys that can nuance different things about why this, why that, what, and everything else. It's a big conversation to be had that's much bigger than what this bill addresses, but it's so simple that, if you're employing people, go ahead and give the metaphor that you like to give with this. It's like, know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah. So I do. So what I say is, so I worked in the steel mill for over 10 years, right? It's like working in Mordor. We're melting stuff with electricity. It's hot, 140 on the floor, 170 on the 90 foot, right? And so it made sense. And we're putting all these alloys in, carbon dust everywhere. You don't want to breathe that junk. So it made sense to wear a mask, right? Hard hat, safety glasses, 2 layers, fire protection equipment. You got molten steel. It's burning hot and carbon dust everywhere. Lime, get you lime burns. But you could take all that off, right? You could go to the locker room, take it all off, and go home. And so, but what I like in this too is medical rape. Right, like we have outlawed in Alabama. You're not going to demand sexual favors from your employees in order to give them an advancement. Right, That's illegal because you don't own them. You don't own people. You don't own what gets to go inside their body, right, and permanently alter their DNA. Right, and so we're not going to allow medical rape as the precondition for employment or the continuation of your employment, because we actually believe that autonomy over your own body as to what goes in it actually is a precious right. And the other example I give to make that point is a pyramid. Pharaoh built pyramids with a wide base at the top. It was him, right? Caste system, wide base. What's good for the masses? So then this is good for the masses. We force it. Liberty's gone. As you go up society, less and less people have a say till he's at the top, literally God. Well, America says flip it upside down. We're not going to start with this wide base of what's good for the masses. We're going to go with that individual point of under God of individual liberties and freedoms, right? So that's where we're going to start. Article 1, Section 35, as I quoted earlier, Alabama State Constitution. So now, because we identify those individual liberties and rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, as we go up the social structure, it gets wider. More people get a chance to participate in elections and government and business and middle class and prosperity, but all on that basis of individual liberties and freedoms. So that means you can't use collective force up here to destroy the foundation of individual liberties and freedoms. They work in harmony, right? So a business has liberties, a business has rights. I'm a free market capitalistic guy. I praise God. I love it, right? But the business has to operate in the context of laws that apply to it too. There's no entity in this country that doesn't have laws. Individuals are governed by laws. Businesses, we tell them we fine, fee, regulate, permit. They're governed by laws. We sing that song, was a beautiful for spacious skies, right? Remember the line that says, confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law. So liberty is defined by a law-ordained, a law-constructed relationship between parties. And so a business has to honor those individual liberties that individual citizens have and build a business environment of work and prosperity and creation and the selling of goods and services that blends in harmony with individual liberties and freedoms and doesn't smash it to pieces, because businesses have to honor the most fundamental block of American society under God that every other block has to honor as individual liberties and freedoms.
That's good. That is good. All right. Well, speaking of free markets and all that, we're going to jump on to the overtime segment and have a conversation about it's a very hot topic, and it's funny to watch people coming in from all different angles and different opinions about, are these tariffs that Trump has been talking about since before I was born, by the way. Like, you can see him on Oprah when I was like 2, and he's like, if I ever ran for president, this is what I do, and it's exactly what he's doing right now. It's like this came out of left field. Like, everyone voted for this. Anyway, I don't want to give away the overtime segment here. So we're going to talk about that. But Ernie, any last thoughts as we come to a close?
I just think that, whether it's the Lake and Riley Act, whether it's the Adeline Deal Act, or the other Alabama Conscientious Right to Refuse Act, I got a couple of Second Amendment bills I've got in there. I just think it's really important that the Alabama citizen really return, number one, to identifying your core beliefs. Identity drives actions. We need to sit down and reconsider, what does it mean to be made in the image of God? And in that context, if God alone gets the big fence, the smaller fences of our lives inside that big fence, good fences make good neighbors, right? We need to think through, what does it mean that God has all authority? He has delegated us smaller fences as legislators, moms, dads, teachers, owners of businesses, employees. And what does it mean to enforce those boundaries so that you don't have sections of society with no boundaries that run over individuals or each other? It's just important that we realize that we need to define those parameters, and we need to return to the understanding that there is no liberty and freedom apart from the foundational Christian beliefs that shape our country and that created us. And so let my people think. And the grassroots movement, as you guys spread the truth and you seek to spread the knowledge of what's going on and let people make decisions, I would simply call upon my fellow Alabamians to arise as one man and to take your nation, your state, by the ears, look it in the face and say, no longer will I sit back on the back seat, uninvolved, not knowing what's going on, not knocking doors, not running for office, not serving my state. I'm going to repent of that and take charge.
Amen. Well, Ernie, thank you so much. Is there anywhere people can follow you? What's your Twitter handle, your X handle?
Yeah, so obviously at my website, ernieyarbrough.com. And if you look me up on Facebook, State Representative Ernie Yarbrough, District 7, and the same on Twitter or X. If you just look up State Rep Ernie Yarbrough, that's right on the X, you'll find me there, and on Instagram as well. So I would be thrilled to engage with you there, ask me questions, or you can email me also, simply ernieyarbrough@gmail.com, and I would love to engage with you.
Awesome. All right, brother. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on. God bless.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, you guys, that'll wrap it up for this week. As always, until next time, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.